Welcome to today's explainer. So today we're kind of playing doctor, but instead of human health, we're performing a medical diagnosis on something you probably walk on literally every single day. Yep, your property's concrete. We're looking squarely at the signs it's time to replace your sidewalk and figuring out whether your walkways need just a simple Band-Aid or full-blown structural surgery.
So I want you to take a quick mental look outside at your own property right now, whether that's your home, a busy retail center, or an industrial site. It's super easy to dismiss a little concrete damage as, just a cosmetic annoyance. But here's the reality check. A sidewalk isn't just a path, it is a major liability checkpoint. Did you know the average trip and fall lawsuit settles for tens of thousands of dollars, while fixing a sidewalk costs just a fraction of that? Crazy, right? What looks like a minor flaw could absolutely be a severe hazard just waiting to trip someone up.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our diagnostic agenda for today. First, the hidden dangers. Second, the warning signs. Third, the diagnosis. And finally, number 4, the treatment.
Starting us off, Section 1, the hidden dangers. Why your sidewalk matters.
We really need to raise the stakes here because ignoring concrete maintenance is a surprisingly massive risk. Honestly, sidewalks are so much more than just a decorative way to get from point A to point B. They are your absolute first line of defense against liability. Plus, they support crucial ADA accessibility standards, and let's face it, they totally dictate your property's curb appeal. And, context really matters here. In extreme environments, think like the intense heat of West Texas or areas with heavy oilfield industrial traffic, a simple cosmetic issue can transform into a full-on legal and safety hazard almost overnight. The environment is just constantly testing the integrity of your concrete.
Moving right along to Section 2, the warning signs, diagnosing the symptoms.
So how do we actually know when your concrete is losing the battle? Well, here's your checklist. I want you to mentally audit your own residential or commercial property as we run through these 7 critical symptoms. Basically, we're keeping an eye out for widespread cracking, uneven sections, pool and water, surface spalling, recurring repair failures, tree root intrusion, and ADA noncompliance. Let's zoom in and look a bit closer at a few of these major red flags. Now, this right here is a vital, totally actionable metric to keep in mind. 1/4 of an inch. See a single hairline crack? Honestly, not a huge deal. Concrete naturally expands and contracts. But if you start seeing cracks wider than 1/4 inch, or maybe deep intersecting cracks that break the concrete into multiple chunks, you've got a structural problem on your hands. This usually signals underlying soil movement, kind of like expansive clay soils that shrink and swell whenever moisture changes. Essentially, it means the actual foundation beneath your walkway is failing. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this next vital number, 1/2 inch. Just 1/2 inch of uneven settlement. Believe it or not, that is all it takes to constitute a major trip hazard and a direct violation of ADA accessibility standards. When the soil underneath erodes or compacts unevenly, the slab just sinks or tilts. And if someone trips on that tiny 1/2 inch lip, the liability falls completely on the property owner. Then we have this symptom known as spalling. Basically, this is surface flaking or chipping, where that top layer of concrete literally peels away. It often exposes the rough, bumpy aggregate rock underneath. And look, spalling isn't just an eyesore. It tells us the damage is way more than skin deep. It's usually caused by repeating freezing and thawing, poor drainage where water just infiltrates the slab, or heavy industrial equipment just grinding down the surface over time. Next up, we really have to talk about the issue of tree roots. Just compare a minor cosmetic root crack with severe vertical displacement. Don't get me wrong, trees are fantastic for property value, but man, their roots wreak absolute havoc on concrete. If a root just causes a tiny crack, you might be totally fine. But typically, roots cause severe vertical displacement, meaning they actually lift the whole slab up. And grinding down the surface of the concrete, that just won't work here because it compromises the slab's overall thickness. You're looking at full root removal and needing a completely new subgrade. Which brings us to Section 3, the diagnosis. Repair versus full replacement. All right, this is the critical decision-making phase where you have to choose between a temporary Band-Aid or structural surgery. Let's walk through this decision matrix so you can clearly differentiate when a cheap patch is okay versus when a full replacement is just an unavoidable investment. If you just have hairline cracks or maybe damage to a single isolated section, a repair may work perfectly fine. But if you've got extensive cracking, multiple sunken panels, widespread drainage issues, or those pesky repeated repair failures, replacement is highly recommended. Patching those bigger issues is honestly just throwing good money after bad. So the really crucial point here is summarized perfectly in this quote. Widespread structural sidewalk damage is rarely resolved with surface-level solutions. That is your core takeaway for today. If the underlying base, the soil compaction, and the drainage issues aren't fully fixed, a surface patch is just going to crack again next season. You'll literally just be paying for the exact same repairs over and over again.
And that leads us to Section 4, the treatment, the 6-step replacement process. Let's move to and see how this builds. If your diagnosis dictates a replacement, you definitely need to know what happens next. Let's demystify the actual replacement process so you know exactly what you're paying a contractor for. This happens across 6 distinct steps. It kicks off with Step 1, a really thorough site evaluation, followed by Step 2, the careful removal of the damaged concrete. But I want to heavily emphasize Step 3, subgrade preparation. This is where the soil is graded and compacted to prevent future shifting. Honestly, if this is skipped, your new sidewalk is pretty much doomed. Step 4 is forming and reinforcement, where rebar or wire mesh is added to give the concrete some incredible tensile strength. And finally, we have Step 5, pouring and finishing for a nice slip-resistant surface, wrapped up with Step 6, curing and final inspection.
Naturally, you're going to wonder about downtime. Well, here is the recovery timeline for our concrete patient. At 0 hours, the pouring and finishing are all wrapped up. Between 24 to 48 hours, light foot traffic is usually permitted, so your pathways aren't blocked for too long. However, it does take about 28 days for the full structural curing to be completed. During that first month, you absolutely want to keep any heavy equipment or commercial loads far, far away from the new surface. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought. Is your sidewalk a safe path, or is it a ticking time bomb for liability and escalating costs? I challenge you to actually go walk your property today. Look for those quarter-inch cracks, those half-inch trip hazards, and that pooling water. If your concrete is showing these symptoms, please don't wait for a trip and fall incident to force your hand. Consult a professional and get it diagnosed before a simple repair turns into a mandatory emergency replacement. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy inspecting.